Hello, everyone. I'm WBAL TV's Jason Newton, and just ahead, the leading Democratic candidates for Baltimore mayor in the MPT studio tonight, and we're just a moment away from a live debate that you can watch here or on WBAL TV, also live streaming at mpt.org.
The faces you know, the news you rely on, anytime you want, anywhere you are.
I really value PBS's news coverage because I think it's very rigorous journalism.
Clear and concise reporting.
Both thoughtful and thought-provoking.
Mind-blowingly honest and open.
Information that will help me make a good decision.
With so much at stake, this election year, one place has the news you need to decide. PBS.
April is National Volunteer Month, and here at MPT, it's pretty simple. We couldn't operate without the help of volunteers. Men and women of all ages lend us time and talent. In fact, you can see them at our reception desk or working in offices, or greeting guests at events, or doing many other tasks. They help us meet our mission to entertain, educate, and engage citizens statewide. Thank you, volunteers. We're very grateful, and we thought you ought to know.
Join us Thursday at 7:30 for Your Money in Business. Everything from high finance to the lowdown on consumer savings. It's part of MPT's Public Square, Thursday nights at 7:30 on MPT.
Hello and welcome to the MPT WBAL Baltimore Mayoral Debate for the Democratic candidates. Tonight, we have 6 candidates who each polled at least 5% in the most recent Baltimore Sun poll from left to right. They are Carl Stokes, Elizabeth Embry, Catherine Pugh, Sheila Dixon, David Warnock, and Nick Mosby. We're also joined by an audience from the League of Women Voters. I'm Jason Newton, and I'll be your moderator for this evening's debate. And the rules for the debate are pretty simple. Each candidate will be asked a question from our panel, and they'll have up to 1 minute to respond to that question. Now, there'll be no candidate-to-candidate responses or retorts. Each candidate will have the opportunity to make a closing statement as well of not more than 45 seconds, and there will be no opening statements. How about our panel? They're composed of Charles Robinson from MPT, Jane Miller from WBAL TV, and Clarence Mitchell IV, known as C4 to his audience, from WBAL News Radio 1090. So let's get things started with Jane Miller. She has the first question. Jane.
Thank you, Jason. Good evening, everyone. Baltimore, as we all know, has a perception problem, often a very negative attitude from people not just in the city, but mostly outside the city. What would you do as mayor to change that formula so that people like and trust the city more, so they'll do business here, live here, want to live here, send their kids to school here, and get their entertainment here? Senator Pugh, let's start with you.
Well, people move to cities for 2 reasons: great schools and reduction in crime. So I think there has to be a focus on reducing crime and making sure that our schools are the best that they can be. Also, I think it's important to engage in a marketing campaign, not just for the people who live in our city, but for the visitors who come to our city. And so when I was on City Council, I had proposed that we bring all of the marketing experts together so that we can embark on a real strategy for marketing our city, not only to our residents, but to the outside community. So I look forward to that opportunity to do that. But again, I'll focus on how to reduce crime in our city. As you well know, I sat on the Police Reform Commission, and we've got a plan and has passed in the General Assembly to do just that. And we're also working with our schools, and I talk about accountability, but we want to make sure that our schools are the best, not just in the state, but here in Baltimore. And so I want to make sure that our schools are educating our children at their earliest age, as well as preparing them for college and careers.
Ms. Dixon, how would you answer that question?
Well, first of all, we have great communities and neighborhoods, and we really need to start at home. And the way that we start is by looking at all the jewels in our city and really promoting through our neighborhoods and the ambassadors in our communities. That's where we start. But we also start with showing the public that we have to create and be a safe city. And that's what the first and foremost responsibility of the mayor is to create a safe environment for all citizens who live here, first and foremost, and then secondly, for inviting people to come to Baltimore and realizing that Baltimore is safe. And the way we do this, and I compare New York all the time, is when my daughter went away to school, I saw police officers in the neighborhoods, in communities. They were visible, I felt safe when she went there. We can continue to build on the strengths of what I did under my administration when we had our police officers out in communities, in neighborhoods, engaged, and build on that effort. That's what we really have to do, along with, and of course, each citizen in our city are the ambassadors to show the world that Baltimore is a great place. We have all the ingredients to be very successful in our city.
Ms. Embry?
Thank you. So since last April, Baltimore City has essentially received billions of dollars of negative advertising globally, which is a shame. But the positive is that the eyes of the world are on us right now in Baltimore. And so we need to tell the good stories. And we also need to tell a new story. We need to tell a story of a city that's safe, of a city that has a growing economy, and a growing economy that touches all of our neighborhoods, a city who has transformational schools that are serving all of our students, and a city that's embracing its arts culture and its exciting entrepreneurial spirit, and really telling a new story about Baltimore that builds on the past but also goes into the future.
Mr. Warnock, you are the one candidate on stage that has not been in the public sector. From your perspective, how do you change the negative impression of the city of Baltimore?
You know, this city needs a cheerleader in chief. This city needs someone that's out there every day rewriting the narrative that this is a great place to bring your business and bring your family. I'll do that by going out to the suppliers of our anchor institutions and getting them to bring their manufacturing plants and the regional headquarters to Baltimore. I'll do that by doing the things that I've been doing, like creating great schools like Green Street Academy over on Hilton Parkway. Families stay in Baltimore because they want to have great schools for their kids. We need to create schools in our city that create jobs and opportunity for people. I will be out there rewriting the narrative of Baltimore. We have a culture of low expectations in this city. We have all the talent that we need. We have all the motivation we need. It's about opportunity in this city, and I will bring it to Baltimore.
Councilman Mosby?
That's a great question. Whether you live in Roland Park or you live in Harlem Park, at the end of the day, as soon as you step foot outside of the city of Baltimore, the first thing out of folks' mouth is it really like The Wire? Is it really like the unrest that we saw? And we must get ahead of that. And in order to get ahead of it, we have to take a two-pronged approach. One, drive into sustainable change for crime reduction in our city. So being smarter as it relates to going after predictive analytics, looking at data, and really going after our violent repeat offenders. Last year, we had 344 homicides here in the city of Baltimore, but we know there aren't 344 murderers walking our streets. So we have to aggressively go after them and not go after the communities that they wish to reside in. And then secondly, we must deal with the issue of the school system. You know, if we have a second or third grader that's missing 40 or 50% of school, they're the individuals that are on the propensity to potentially become violent repeat offenders one day. We must get ahead of it, looking at truancy legislation, looking at ways of ensuring that our parents are ensuring that our school system is intact.
Carl, how would you answer that question?
You know, this city has great cheerleaders already. It doesn't need the mayor to do that. It needs a mayor who would change the perception by changing the reality. That's what we need. We don't need to smear this over, put lipstick on it. What this city needs is a mayor who will begin to transform the worst parts of our city. We have a great city, and people are working every day to keep it up and to keep it going and keep fighting. But we're letting them down by giving them schools that don't work, 89%. You know, this city has this Baltimore normal attitude. 89% of our students are below proficiency. It's normal in Baltimore. Nobody's jumping up and down. 344 murders. We're not jumping up and down. It's a Baltimore normal. Look, here's what we need to do. We need to stop the open-air drug markets on our streets. We need to stop allowing people to do whatever they want to do. We need to fix our schools tomorrow. I ran a school. We fixed it in 2 years. We're one of the best schools in the city. To fix the perception, fix the reality.
Our next question comes from Charles Robinson.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk about trust and accountability. Some of you have used this issue in some ads, and others of you have had questions surrounding your both personal and business dealing. Ms. Dixon, I'd like to start with you. I know it will come as no surprise to you that you have a perception problem among Baltimore electorate. Some people who support you have discounted your past, but others were unable to forgive you. Talk to that undecided voter who hasn't made up their mind and convince them they should trust you now.
Thank you for that question. I really appreciate it. And I know that that cloud covers over me, but I also know that the people in this city are forgiving people. And that second chance is not only for me, but for other individuals who are incarcerated, who want to get a second chance. There are a lot of people that are out there. I made a mistake. I paid for that mistake. I've learned lessons from that mistake. I know that in my heart and soul that I am a trustworthy individual, but I also know that that does not define the greatness of how I was as a mayor and as an elected official, where I worked with many people in this city. And so I know I'm going to have to be transparent. I'm going to go in neighborhoods and talk to residents on a regular basis to show them not only my love and my compassion and my desire for the best for this city, but I'm going to do everything in my power to show people that I am trustworthy.
Mr. Mosby, I want to come to you. I know it will come as no surprise to you that a number of people perceive you as riding on your wife's coattails, and that the Sandtown, Winchester area that you represent has literally seen little to no improvement. But now you want to become the mayor. Why?
So first, in dealing with Marilyn Mosby, my wife, the state's attorney, the same cynical folks had the same perception when I was city councilman and she was an attorney running to become state's attorney. I think that's a natural progression, unfortunately, because in our communities, we don't necessarily see families working together. I believe I'm the only person on the stage that's married and that's working together to better my community. Look, at the end of the day, Marilyn and I are committed to the city of Baltimore. That's why we purchased an abandoned house in the middle of West Baltimore on the block that we purchased it on, and that's really important. Regarding Sandtown, Sandtown is in the current state that it's in because of the failed leadership and the failed policies of the past couple of decades. If you expected someone to become a city council member and fix Sandtown in 4 years, it's just not happening. Unfortunately, we've seen hundreds of millions of dollars that have poured into Sandtown for decades. But again, because of failed leadership and failed policies, that's why we're in the state we're in. This election provides folks the opportunity to really change that, change the trajectory of our communities by going after our toughest challenges. And only the mayor of Baltimore has the ability and autonomy of doing that.
Ms. Embry, yes. The name Embry means a lot of things to a lot of people. But your work in the Bernstein administration is one that was tough on crime, but failed to indict a single police incident where a suspect died in custody. Is this a matter of trust? And I know you're going to talk about the legalities of this, but should the electorate trust you to see through maybe the legalities?
So I've spent my career building and holding the public's trust, and I'm very proud of the work I did as Deputy State's Attorney. We brought violent crime down to 40-year lows, and we did it while cutting arrests in half and while diverting thousands of cases involving addiction and poverty out of the criminal justice system into treatment and job training. And I want to go even further as mayor and really end the war on drugs in this city as it's currently run and stop arresting people for being poor and victims of addiction. But I want to get to your point. We actually prosecuted more police officers than our predecessor, Patricia Jessamy, who I also work for as an assistant state's attorney. So I'm proud of that record too. And you know, when the tragedies happen that someone dies in police custody, it's an incredibly emotional, hard time. And I think you're referring to two cases in which, you know, it was a really hard decision and thorough investigations were made and then reviewed by external third-party entities, review boards, and found that, again, there was no criminal activities. But as mayor, I want to change that dynamic. I want to make sure that doesn't happen. We have to change the way we police in this city. And having worked in the criminal justice system, I understand how important it is to change that, to change the trust between prosecutors, police, and the communities they serve.
I'm going to have one more question, and then we're going to get out of this subject matter. Ms. Pugh, you've touted your experience in Annapolis with legislative leaders of each chamber, but can you get a reluctant governor to embrace the city you hope to lead?
Absolutely. In fact, this session, as you know, just ended last night at midnight. We get to bring back $290 million, working with this governor and with this legislative body that understands, and what we've gotten everybody to understand is that while the unrest occurred in Baltimore, it shined a light on communities and neighborhoods that have been deprived for decades. And so together we were able to put together a package to help move our city forward. And the governor has already said, and he did, allow that package to fully go through. It is important that a legislative leader not only deal with the people of their party, but the people of the opposite party. Because after all, we are a city and a state run by a Republican governor, but that does not mean that we can't discount that governor and ask him for help. And as you well know, we've already brought back about $7 million as it relates to dealing with our neighborhoods and the devastation that has occurred. So we're excited about the $290 million working with the governor that we are bringing back, but also for the demolition money that will come back to our city. It is important that there is a relationship with the governor, especially when you talk about some of the needs of the city as it relates to transportation needs. You know, we lost the red line, but at the same time, we're looking at a rapid bus system. Thank you.
Thank you. C4, you're up.
Good evening, candidates. This first question goes to Councilman Carl Stokes.
I can't see that.
With the attention on lead-contaminated water in Flint, Michigan, Baltimore City Public Schools, and by the way, we're almost $16,000 per pupil that we spend, which is third most per pupil of the 100 largest school districts in the country, only trailing New York City and Boston. But still, we have over 100 of our schools using bottled water because of lead and paint pipe problems that have existed since at least 1992. What specific plans, Councilman Stokes, would you move on to replace those lead-contaminated pipes in our schools?
In the first 2 years, I would start taking those pipes out and replace them entirely. You know, I've spoken about this several times in forums in the last 6 months, C4, so thanks for asking the question. I've said over and over and over again, you go into a school, they have a trash bag over the water fountain saying don't use the water fountain. But you go into the bathroom and the kids cup their hands under the faucet and they're drinking the water out of the same pipes that the water is flowing through. In the first 2 years of my administration as mayor, I'm going into those schools and I'm completely taking those pipes out of those buildings.
Thank you. Former Mayor Dixon, when it comes to Baltimore City's contribution to education, we are the lowest in the 24 jurisdictions in the state of Maryland. We contribute less than 20% of our city dollars to public education. As mayor, what would you do to increase our contribution? That way your say in how the schools run would be more significant.
Well, first, let me just clarify that when I was mayor, I made a point and I put together a children's agenda so that I could increase the amount that we were contributing to our Baltimore City Public Schools. As mayor, moving forward in the future, I'm going to balance that. We have to, the way we end crime is by focusing on education, by providing the best schools for our children, by enhancing our schools, by creating community schools. And so in my plan, it talks about doubling the number of community schools where we can create wraparound services for our children in our schools, as well as after-school programs for intergenerational individuals, from grandparents to parents to children. The schools have to be the center of the community. Education is going to be how we eliminate poverty, how we deal with drug addiction, all the systemic things that tend to hold us back as a city. And that's going to be my major focus, particularly coming as an educator, working as a teacher, as well as alternative ed in school. You know, that is a priority for my administration.
Mr. Warnock, when it comes to oversight of Baltimore City Public Schools, unfortunately, we've had to hear about $70 billion deficits in the media before Annapolis hears about them, or frankly, before the City Council even hears about them. How much more closely would you as mayor keep track of the fiscal situation of Baltimore City Public Schools?
Well, that's a great question. You know, when Gregory Thornton came to North Avenue a year and a half ago, he found $3.6 million worth of annual expenses in ghost employees and spouses that weren't spouses on the health care plan. That's just at North Avenue. And we haven't done an audit of our municipal functions since William Donald Schaefer was mayor of this great city. So we first and foremost need to find out where we're spending our money. 60% of the money that comes to Baltimore City Public Schools ends up in the classroom. That's where we're going to need to spend more money, in our classroom. And you know, the plans of action that I have for Baltimore City are born from experience. 5 years ago, I started Green Street Academy. Next year, we are going to graduate kids with certifications in healthcare, construction design and management, where they'll actually get 3 college credits from Baltimore County Community College, and healthcare, technology, and construction design and management. We need to have a mayor that takes responsibility for our public schools, takes responsibility for the academic outcomes of our kids.
Thank you. Senator Pugh, when it comes to the issue of vocational education, everybody talks about the fact that we've abandoned many of our vocational schools. A lot of our young people are not going to college. If you're mayor, what kind of emphasis would you put through public schools to increase our vocational educational opportunities?
I'm glad you asked that question. One of the things that I've already done is we passed legislation this session working with Nancy Grasmick to create a new way of doing public schools, especially high schools, because we have to bring back some of our schools such as Carver, giving them more increased opportunities to educate our children, not just to prepare them for college, but to prepare them for careers. So when we talk about the community school system, it has to be more blended learning. Preparing our children for careers means giving them the opportunity to have inside of the school system plumbing opportunities, to learn about plumbing opportunities, to learn about construction, to learn about electrical engineering, because even if they enter into these careers, it also allows them the opportunity to begin to build their own businesses, and if they should decide later to go to college, that is an option as well.
Jay Miller, you're up.
Let's talk about crime, public safety, always a hot topic in Baltimore. For the past 30 or 40 years, the city has been essentially doing the same thing in its public safety initiatives. And yet, despite all of the tweaking and the changes and different initiatives, et cetera, we continue to be one of the most dangerous cities in America. Ms. Dixon, you were mayor for a period of time between 2007 and 2010. You were in the city council for a long time. What would you do differently now that wasn't done for all of those years?
Well, first, I don't believe that under my administration we were doing the same things as we did 30 years ago. That's number one. We began to really focus and target the most violent offenders. I also created the gun registry, and I'm going to build on that. Well, we were going after illegal guns, but not only going after the illegal guns, we were visiting those individuals, the parole and probation, sheriff's department, the state's attorney's department, the police department. We collectively were going out visiting those individuals who were arrested with illegal guns, and we're going to do it even better and find alternatives. See, here's the thing. We have to help folks to find alternative plans. We have to get them into training, get them into jobs and opportunities. And then third and last, not last, but third, is our police officers. We need to create and bring our officers up to a level so that we have not only attrition, but have our officers enough so that we don't spend the amount of money in overtime, so that we can have our officers in the neighborhoods, permanent foot patrol, so that the community gets to know those officers and not move from place to place based on the crime. And last but not least, technology. Upgrade the technology where we have real-time technology where officers and citizens can use it to know what's going on in their communities and then respond.
Senator Pugh, Senator Pugh, do you have something you would do differently?
Well, one of the things that we have to face is that 75% of our officers do not live in our city. And so I think it's very important that we use incentives to get our police officers living in our city and even training our police officers. I think that we need to look at the facilities at Coppin, as other candidates have talked about, in our city. I think that this will allow us to have police officers driving their cars home. The other issue is we have such a dark city, and we need to light our city up. Just this session, which ended again last night, we were able to pass the police reform legislation that would allow us to create more trust between the police of the community and the community of the police. The Civilian Review Board has to be strengthened. Our trial board, we've now been given the right to bargain with the police department, to have voting members on the trial boards. That's important. Having our police officers walk the beats in our neighborhoods is important, but also training is important. Not to be aggressive, but to be more understanding of many of the issues that we face in our community, whether it is drug addiction or mental illness. Those things we must be aware of as police officers.
Some of you have advocated for an end to the war on drugs. Councilman Mosby, what does that really mean?
Well, unfortunately, there's been a huge paradigm shift in when we look at American policing, specifically in urban areas. It's kind of the broken windows concept. And we provide a level of enforcement in these communities over and over again and disproportionately impacted the residents in those communities. And that disproportionate impact directly impacts the perception and the relationship between our communities and our police officers. We have to really get back to the basics and be smart on crime. That's leveraging data, and that's going after our violent repeat offenders through predictive analytics. We can't just provide enforcement on communities. We must provide enforcement on those violent repeat offenders. We have to develop ways like in Philadelphia, there's a program called Philly Rising, where they provide the resources and tools for police officers to really deal with the community other than just enforcement of law in the community. So there's an extension of the mayor's office inside of that police district, and that police officers have direct access to resources from the mayor's office to provide to the citizens on the street. It doesn't increase their administrative or their paperwork. It just just provides a level of access to them to really build the relationships that they need to get these violent repeat offenders off our streets.
About 21% of the arrests that Baltimore police officers make involve drug possession. So, Ms. Embry, when you say we want to end the war on drugs, does that mean you tell your police commissioner don't arrest folks for possession of drugs?
Yeah, I will answer that, but I want to first talk about public safety. So I'm the only one on this stage who has actually done the work.
I would prefer you answer the question.
I will. I'll get to it in 1 second. Who has done the work on public safety. And as Deputy State's Attorney, as Chief of the Criminal Division for the Attorney General's Office, and Director of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, I've actually done the work and have a track record of making the city safer. And my plan on public safety, the Baltimore Sun has said, is the best not just for reducing crime, but restoring faith with between the community and the criminal justice system. And I'm very proud of that. And part of that, to answer your question, is ending the war on drugs. And I mean very specifically following the lead of cities like Seattle and saying we are not arresting people for possession. In fact, we're putting them directly into the public health sector, directly into treatment. And that has saved the city money because it lowers recidivism. It helps communities more than arresting people and having them cycle through the system. And it helps the people themselves. And I'm someone who has prosecuted these drug crimes, and I know that it devastates communities, and I know that it wastes our taxpayer dollars. So yes, exactly, that is precisely what I mean.
Mr. Warnock, you have touted that you have no political experience. I think that's one of your campaign slogans that I've heard. I wanted you to take that entrepreneurial ideas that you have and apply it to the current police commissioner. Should he have gotten this job? And is he doing a good job? And how will you measure if he's doing a good job if you're the mayor of this city?
That's a great question. You know, the political status quo in Baltimore City has brought us the drug problems that we're talking about, has brought us the lack of jobs, has brought us the 17,000 vacant houses. Kevin Davis is doing a good job, but he will be evaluated in my administration on whether he can create a promote from within culture in the police department. We got to stop going to Oakland to get our next chief of police and Milwaukee to get the next superintendent of public schools. We need to create a police department where a young person feels like they have the ability to get the top job. And in my administration, we are also going to restore all the police district offices. We need to get people talking to each other again in Baltimore. Yes, we're going to have more cops living in Baltimore. Yes, we're going to have more foot patrols and more body cameras. But imagine our police district offices as places of public engagement, of community engagement. Imagine a PAL center in each police district office, or free Wi-Fi in a police district office. Let's give our cops a respectable place to work.
Mr. Stokes, yes. I believe you were one of those who voted against giving a contract to this police committee. Am I correct on that?
You're right, I did. I was one of two.
If not him, then whom?
No, that's not the point at all, with respect, Charles. The point was, I thought that the commissioner was experienced enough and credentialed enough to get the job at that moment, but to give him a 5-year contract, work undone, work unseen, you know, here we are, 3 months into the new year, and we're up 50% in shootings year to year from last year. This is pre-Freddie Gray. We're up 11% in homicides in this city year to year. Is Kevin Davis doing a good job? I like Kevin Davis a lot. But apparently, we, the government, and Kevin and his troops, we need to get together in a plan that keeps our citizens safe. Our citizens are not safe. You know what? People come to me, they're afraid to park a block away from their homes because they don't know if they can get that 1 block to their door. When we're living in a city that has people that afraid, we're doing something very, very wrong. And we have to get together with Kevin and everyone else and figure this out sooner rather than later.
Ms. Dixon, should we have a short lease on Commissioner Davis, or would he have a short lease in your administration?
Would he have a short lease? That's an interesting question. Let me say this. First of all, I picked probably one of the best commissioners who was grown inside of the police department, Commissioner Fred Bilfeld. I believe that Commissioner Davis is heading on the right track, but the question is, and I'm not there, so I can't answer several questions, is whether or not the police are going to have the kind of contract that they were committed to, and can that get resolved before the new administration starts? Because you have police officers who are leaving the police department. We lost a lot of great experienced police officers. We have a very young police force. So the question is he going to be able to balance experience with recruiting new officers? And does all of our officers know the plan? The one thing that our police department has to do, and the leader and the mayor of this city, is everyone has to be on the same page. Baltimore, we need a safe city, but we also got to get people back to work. We've got to get our young people engaged and involved in the community and get them into jobs for this summer.
That's your time, man. I'm sorry. We're going to move to C4, I think. and the focus, Port Covington.
Correct. Everybody knows, at least have talked about the fact that there's a $5.5 billion project that is on the table. It's called the Port Covington Project. Many people around the country are calling it the most ambitious urban development project in the country. Let's start with you, Senator Pugh. When it comes to evaluating this project, and right now $535 million of tax relief is on the table potentially for this project, how will you evaluate whether the city should embark upon giving that type of tax relief for the actual project itself?
Well, I think I would have brought in some experts to really take a look at whether or not this is the type of tax relief package that we ought to be implementing. But when I think about this particular project, I also think about the opportunities that it will present. You're talking about 26,000 jobs. You're talking about also a mode of transportation that does not currently exist, that we ought to be taking advantage of, seeing how we link it from one side of the city to the other. You also talk about the potential for linking with neighborhoods where unemployment is at its highest. Cherry Hill, for example, is one of those neighborhoods, which is, according to the Baltimore Neighborhoods Indicators Alliance, is one of the top 10 unemployed areas in our city. So there ought to be some type of relationship in terms of project labor agreements and employment contracts that focus on hiring the people within those neighborhoods. Also, you want to know who the partners are. I think every time a project gets presented to the mayor and to the city council, there ought to be some discussion about equalization of wealth, leveraging opportunities, partnering throughout the city, making sure that we're lifting the least while we lift all of us, and at the same time, that businesses are cooperating with each other. That's the kind of mayor I would be, and that's the kind of thing I think should happen with that kind of project.
Ms. Embry, when it comes to projects like this, a lot of people talk minority participation when it comes to contracts, but they don't talk about, as Senator Pugh just referenced, jobs that actually go to the citizens in the community. With this much time ahead of time, what kind of training would you give to local citizens to prepare them for these upcoming jobs?
Well, I talk a lot about this in my plan because it's so important. So the Port Covington project is exciting, and I think largely because it's bringing jobs at a scale that we haven't seen in the city for a generation. And it's also bringing manufacturing back to the city, and it's bringing new parkland, and it's bringing public transportation. And that's very exciting. But we need a mayor and an administration that can negotiate effectively, that understands the numbers, an administration that will not, as has recently happened, speed the process through BDC without transparency. We need to have faith in our government that it is accountable, that it is honest, and that it is really doing its job to negotiate the best deal for the city. And part of that means assuring that we are hiring locally. And part of that is putting that in writing so we can enforce it, but part of it also is the city helping to create that pipeline, because people need the public transportation to get to the jobs. They need the automatic expungement so they're not held back by their criminal records. And we also need to align all of our training systems so that we are supporting, whether it's in our school system, in our community college, working with labor through the apprenticeship programs, doing everything we need to do to make sure that people are trained and ready and able to get to those jobs.
Mr. Warnock, this is your bailiwick. You're an entrepreneur. You're someone in the private sector. How do you evaluate these projects and whether or not they're good for the city or not?
Well, the reality is, time and time again, people who have made major political contributions, developers who have made major political contributions, have a lot of say in our city. And if you look at the people in this race, they continue to take major campaign contributions from developers and major corporations. And those developers and corporations get what they pay for. So the way I evaluate that is, one, the number of jobs that are created. And are those jobs going to go to local people, right? Port Covington is a wonderful place. It's a great opportunity, but it's right on 95. What we don't want is those jobs to go to people who are driving up 95 in the absence of the people over in Brooklyn and Curtis Bay. And those people have been left behind. We need to put them to work, and we need to create a public transportation system that works for all of our citizens in Baltimore. I've proposed, for example, a modified red line that goes from Social Security and stops at Lexington Market, because we need to create a transportation system that respects our people and allows people on the west side of Baltimore to get to those jobs on the east side.
And former Mayor Dixon, when it comes to, and once again, this is in your shop, minority participation on projects like this, we always hear that we're trying to reach the goal of 20% or 25%. How will you actually achieve that goal?
Well, first of all, in this project of $535 million TIF, we need to assess whether or not that amount is actually needed and do an extensive study on that. Secondly, we need to incorporate for the city that we put in a profit sharing so that money comes back to the city. Third, I've been working with minority companies for the last 5 years. I know what it takes. They hire people in our communities. So what we need to do is to make sure within this plan that not only that it provides jobs, but we've got to go back and do something even more basic, training. Training is where the weakness is. And so in my plan that was touted by the Sun being the most comprehensive, it talks about MBs and WBs and creating more opportunities for MBs and WBs. But it also talks about tripling the training money that's needed, because right now that's where we're weak. And so I'm going to put a lot of focus on training as part of the job creation, along with increasing that TIF to help Westport, Cherry Hill, Curtis Bay, so that all of it connects with Port Covington.
Jane.
You have all mentioned police accountability and changes in policing and changes in holding police officers accountable. Last night, the state legislature did pass incremental reforms to the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights and other enactments. As mayor, would you use your power to negotiate with the Fraternal Order of Police in a new contract, which will occur on your watch, to enact stronger reforms on the topic of accountability? Senator Pugh.
Absolutely. And that is why when we were having this bill on the floor, I raised the question about the legislation. Is the language in the bill as we wrote it? And that language already said, give us 2 members of the trial board who were voting members. So as you well know, we now have the power, because we didn't get exactly what we wanted, to negotiate with the FOP as it relates to having members on the trial board who can actually vote. So I will use my powers as mayor to do those negotiations, because I've had the conversation not only with the police department, but with the FOP, because what I've said is that we must build trust in our communities among the police and the community. And in order to do that, you have to be more inclusive and you have to be more transparent. So I look forward to the opportunity to do those negotiations and to have those discussions with the FOP. I've had them already. I look forward to moving forward with my view on what we should have with this police department.
Ms. Dixon, would you use your power as mayor to go to the FOP and say, I need to get more reforms out of this contract?
Definitely correct. And in my public safety plan, it talks about bringing the FOP to the table with my administration so that we can deal with not only the accountability but the trust. I'm also going to extend and expand the Civilian Review Board to give it additional teeth so that it has a professional staff needed, so that when individuals bring not only a formal complaint but a call that they can do, or email, or even send a picture, that they were going to get a response right away, and that the community will be engaged and know that they can get an answer through the Civilian Review Board. So yes, that's in my plan. I definitely believe that the FOP has to be at the table so that we can deal with accountability and trust within our community.
Councilman Mosby, should one of the members of the trial board be a civilian who has voting power?
I think so. I think that in order for us to continue to grow transparency in our community, in order for us to grow that trust, that it's important for us to provide real access to community members. The Civilian Review Board today, a third of its members do not show up. We know that we have archaic policies like the non-disparagement agreements, which are basically gag orders. It's only 7 other cities around this country, no other major city, which has gag orders in place, that if the trust of a citizen is defied by a police department and the city settles with that individual is no longer able to talk about it. All that does is provide the empowerment for those same officers to go around and do the same things over and over again. The Sun did an amazing job of doing a report of 6 years where the city's paid out $11 million. An 87-year-old grandmother's shoulder was broken. And during that time, we saw that the same officers were appearing in case by case by case. It's important for us to provide real transparency, real access to our citizens, and that's how you grow real trust in the community.
Mr. Stokes, if you're elected mayor of Baltimore City, I can tell you you're going to get a lot of new faces. In addition to that, these new faces want to take away your power. In fact, they've asked that they remove the strong mayoral government that we currently have. Are you okay with that?
You know, it's my bill. It's my bill who said take away some of the powers of the mayor. It's more democratic. It's more American. The framers of the Constitution wanted a balance of powers. It didn't want one body to overweigh the rest of the body. It is the people who get more input into their government by changing that balance in Baltimore that is the most powerful, influential executive branch in the entire United States of America. I'm not only okay with it, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to being able to have these conversations with my colleagues on the city council. I'm looking forward to being able to walk and talk and sit in the streets and have people tell me what we should be doing so that I'm not the king. I'm not the czar. I'm not the guy who's all-seeing. I can't wait to share power with the citizens of this city.
Ms. Pugh, I'm going to guess that you're not too thrilled about this idea that you can't do the things you want if you're the mayor of this city, are you?
Well, I think it's about the people of the city, but what I would like to see us is focus on how we build a great city. How do we get our city working? How do we work together? But more importantly, you should have a relationship with the city council, and you should have a relationship with the president. But the thing that you really want is to be able to make decisions in the best interest of the people, and that's what a mayor does. And when you elect someone that you can trust, when you elect someone who knows about accountability, when you elect someone who has a vision for the city, then that's what you want to give that mayor, the power to make decisions that are in the best interest of the people, and that's what the kind of mayor that I'll be.
Mr. Dixon, I'm going to guess that you've been through this process one or two times where you've had to make a decision that that council didn't really want to do, and sometimes you had to drag them kicking and screaming. Are you okay that, or maybe should we go to a city manager type job? I mean, you seem to be a great cheerleader. Are you a great manager too?
Well, I think that I'm probably a bigger manager than cheerleader, or balance of both. But I also know that having the experience of being the chair of the Board of Estimates as well as the president of the City Council and mayor, that I'm a team player. So I've been able to work cooperatively with the council. So I'm convinced that these bills would not have come forth under my administration because I know how to communicate and work with my constituents as well as the council. They have a constituent that they represent as well as the mayor, as well as the comptroller. And I think it's about collaboration. The one thing that we don't want to see happen, and the voters will make this decision, is we don't want this to become political and then pulling for power, because you're going to get less done if you don't collaborate and work cohesively together.
C4, you're up.
We're facing, Baltimore City, according to many estimates, a problem that Detroit, Michigan, unfortunately had to face, which is potential bankruptcy. When former Mayor Dixon left office, it was a $121 million deficit each year. We've seen $60 million, $50 million deficits. Let me start with you, Councilman Stokes. How would you approach dealing with what seems to be a fiscal imbalance in Baltimore City that must be addressed at some point?
Talk about perception, C4. We're nowhere near bankruptcy. Our pensions are all great. You know how I know this, sir? Because when they tell me that we don't have enough money for recreation centers or for schools, and then some rich guy pulls up his truck to City Hall and says, I need $100 million, and we shovel money out of the back of City Hall into his truck. And he drives away. He doesn't even close the door. He doesn't care how many dollars fly out.
You're not talking about David Warnock and his pickup truck.
Couldn't fit $100 million. No, I'm talking about a truck that has doors. That has doors. No, not David. Okay. We have money in this town. I was giving you a story and maybe a little bit of levity, but it's so much truth to that. We do dole out a lot of money to very wealthy people who don't need it, while the rest of the city suffers. Our schools, our rec centers, people paying too high water bills. There's no reason to pay these water bills that we're paying and then be told, just pay it when you call downtown. We're not in trouble with bankruptcy at all.
Senator Pugh, when the councilman says that, I hear him, but independent reports do show that we are on an unsustainable path in the future. Do you agree with Councilman Stokes? Are we not on that path, or should we make changes to our budget potentially facing these issues?
I think we need to make some changes to our budget in terms of what we include, but I think the councilman is right in the sense that we have a AA bond rating. This is the highest bond rating in 50 years, which allows us to do many of the projects that we already have. What we need to do is take a look at our budget, scrub it, and figure out what should not be in our budget. I think when you say that schools are a priority, then you have to prioritize your budget so that you can put the monies in the school system that you need to. The other thing is we have a lot of nonprofits and so forth in our budget. So we really need to look at the budget and see how we fix it. But again, we have an opportunity to do some great things. We need to create an infrastructure trust so that we can get our water system fixed, so that we can fix the infrastructure of our city. And when you look at what other cities across the country are doing, when I looked at what New York is doing, what Chicago has done, they've developed these trusts so that they can get private dollars into the city to fix some of the problems that the city faces. We can't raise our water bills high enough to deal with the problems that this city is dealing with, but we can fix our city.
Okay. C4, are you still up?
So one more, just to former Mayor Dixon, I mentioned you, I referenced the deficit that you left, and we have 1/3 of our city property that we do not collect taxes from, which I think is part of the burden. Could you reference that?
Well, first of all, I've never had a budget except one time in the time that I've served in public office where we had a surplus. So, but I've worked with deficits where we, during a time when we were in a recession, that I was able to do more with little. And so what we have to do is, it's constant performance audits with our agencies to determine what we're doing and how we're doing it with our tax dollars. We have to increase our tax base. We have to look at new revenues. One of the things that the reason why I supported the Horseshoe Casino was a new revenue source to help to reduce property tax and to put it into schools, but that's not happening. And so I've never known to have deficit, but when we end the fiscal year, at the end of the year, you have to balance that budget. So we have to do a better job in what we need to be in the business for and what we don't need to be in the business for, and also increase our mass of individuals. I mean, we talk about nonprofits. Our large nonprofits are paying pilots. You know, if we want to talk about churches and others, they contribute through the rain tax as well as the cell phone tax. So there are a lot of things that are out there. But what we have to do is performance audits and audits within our agencies.
Jane.
What is the newest, boldest thing you would do if elected? Senator Pugh.
Well, I've already talked about we've got 77,000 people unemployed in our city, but yet we have jobs down at the port. We have jobs down at and as it relates to Social Security. So one of the things I talk about is taking all of those jobs and putting them in a database and going out into our communities, what I call mobile units. We know the areas of our city where unemployment exists. We know that Old Town Mall area is the #1 unemployed area in our city. So I'm going to create these mobile units. I've begun discussions with the corporate community on how to do this. And at the same time, I want to take the jobs directly to the communities. And on those job buses, I call them, we will have employment counselors. I want to take the Office of Employment Development in terms of their training and train people on the job as opposed to training them in classrooms. I think that's very bold. 77,000 people unemployed, and if my projections are correct, we can reduce unemployment in the city over the next 4 years.
Ms. Dixon, how do you answer that question? You've already been in the job. What would you do differently now?
Well, first and foremost, we have to have a safe city. That has to be the priority of the mayor. Secondly, with all the vacant properties that we have, something bold and new that I try to do, but because of politics I couldn't do, is a land bank and land trust. Well,
that's
but it is for Baltimore.
What's a new idea?
Well, it's new for Baltimore, and it's the way we eliminate the vacant properties in this city and we bring back investment. Third, I'm going to increase the living wage for city workers to $15 so that they can take care of their families. I'm going to take that position. Third, I'm going to triple the training money because the jobs are there, but people are not connected because they don't have the training.
Ms. Embry, what's the newest, boldest thing that you would do as mayor?
Well, the boldest thing is to restore the public trust in our government and have a government that is responsive to the people. And for too long, we have not had that. We have had pay-to-play politics. We have mayors that are distracted by conflicts of interest, by scandals, by investigations. And we have to have a mayor who on day one can start fixing the city's problems and not be distracted by scandals and investigations and by lobbyist money that's being solicited, right at the time that people are testifying in front of the senators' committees. I would ask the senator, if the Board of Estimates has contracts before them, millions of dollars of contracts in front of the Board of Estimates, would you hold fundraisers before? Would you solicit funds from the lobbyists? Is that the standard that we'll see in Baltimore city government?
Senator Pugh would like to respond to that.
I think when desperate people do desperate things, but let me just say this. I've done nothing wrong. And there are at least 6 people running in the state of Maryland that are members of the General Assembly. And I believe that when the laws are changed, as I've said on ethics committees, we will change those laws. And I will abide by those laws as I've always done. So I look forward to the transparency that I will present as the next mayor of this city, because I know how to work with people. I understand that different things call for different actions. But more importantly, I know how to work with people across the city, and I will continue to do that.
You all made it this far without talking to each other, and then we can get to that. Let's go. Charles, you up?
Yes. I want to talk about the young people in this city and how they perceive the mayor of Baltimore. I can tell you, as a young man who grew up in this city, I always thought, wow, the mayor is a pretty big deal. Tell me, Mr. Warnock, why is it a big deal that you're the mayor of this city to the young people that are out there?
This is the most important election of a generation. This is about how we view each other. This is about how we view this city. And frankly, this is about how the world views us. Politics, as usual, the political status quo have led us to a position where, yes, our public pension plans are at risk. Yes, our city's running a big deficit. But we need to graduate kids from our high schools with the skills that they need to get the jobs of the future in today's economy. We need to meet them where they are. 96% of my kids at Green Street Academy are on free and reduced lunch. 15% of my kids don't have a permanent address, but 90% of my kids show up to school every day with a cell phone. These are digital natives. What we're going to do is we're going to meet them where they are and give them the certifications and the toolkit that they need to get employment if they decide not to go to a 2- or 4-year college. And we're also going to create a system where kids get college credit right in high school. That's cool. That appeals to kids. That gives them a future, and that will cut crime.
Mr. Mosby, you were one of those kids at one point. Tell me, what do you say to the young man who lives maybe in Sandtown, Winchester, and is not like you? What do you say to him?
Well, the first thing I do, I think that, when we look at it, when he looks in my eyes, he sees himself. I mean, I constantly talk about my story of growing up in Northeast Baltimore with 6 women in a 3-bedroom house, where I watched my mother every single day wake up at 4:30 a.m. To catch 2 buses to put food on our table. The first person in my family to go to college, working through corporate America, and now working at City Hall for the past 5 years. I'm the only person on the stage that can truly connect the dots of the best and the worst of the city to the productivity of the city. I'm the only person on the stage that can connect the dots from the corporate boardrooms to every single street corner. And that's what I tell that young man, that young man through adversity, no matter that life is hard, but it's fair. Because there's been folks out there that have dealt with the same situations that you're currently going through and have been very successful in the dreams that they have in their head. I talk to children all the time, and I tell them that at the end of the day, life is between 2 people. That's you and you. You give the effort that you put in to achieve your success, but you also are the ones that doubt your success. And it's about providing effort and real dreaming for our young folks.
I'm sorry to stop you because I make sure everyone gets a final statement. Let's just go right into it. Mr. Stokes, you have 45 seconds.
Thank you. So I'm an old school, walk the streets, lose leather public official. I'm the guy who walks the streets, who people come to my home, sit in my living room, sit on my front porch, and we talk about things. I'm the average guy, small business guy, who has a passion for education, who makes things happen for the average man and woman. After running a school very successfully, walking away after 2 years, with 90% of my kids today are sophomores in college from my first graduating class, I'm the guy who goes back down to City Hall and sees we're not auditing the books on most of our city agencies, and I demand that we run audits. And then I go and pass a law. It's crazy I had to do such a thing, but now we're auditing the books on all the divisions of us. I'm the guy who will make sure that we start policing all of our neighborhoods the same way. You know that there are neighborhoods that people do drugs, but they can't buy drugs. They can't sell drugs. But they can come to East and West Baltimore, and they can buy their drugs in the open. I will not allow that to happen to my citizens, those good citizens living in those communities.
Got to go, sir. I'm sorry, and we started the clock late. I apologize. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Jason. I've spent this campaign crisscrossing the city, talking about ideas and solutions. But I've also spent that time listening. And what I've heard very loud and very clear from the citizens of Baltimore is that the 2 issues they are focused on above all is public safety and public trust. On safety, the Baltimore Sun says, I have the best plan for reducing crime and restoring faith in our criminal justice system, period. On public trust and accountability, the Baltimore Sun and the city papers have best position to root out waste and corruption, period. This is the most important election in a generation, and we need a mayor we can trust. A mayor we can trust to end the violence and the war on drugs. A mayor we can trust to build affordable housing and strengthen our schools. A mayor we can trust to expand our economy and reduce income inequality. A mayor we can trust to govern with integrity.
Got to stop here,
to
Ms.
get the
Embry.
things done, and a mayor we can make all of Baltimore proud of.
Ms.
Thank
Pugh.
you.
I'm excited about being the next mayor of Baltimore. I'm excited about moving us forward as opposed to backwards. I always see the glass as half full as opposed to half empty. We've done some great things in this city, but I want to push us forward, building better schools, having built one of the first brand new public schools in this city in 30 years. I want to push us forward by eliminating some of the crime problems that we see in our city. I want to push us forward, lighting up our city so that our neighbors and our communities feel safe walking our streets. I want to build trust with our communities, with the police, and our police with the community. I look forward to moving our city forward and not backwards, and leveraging opportunities, creating inequalities across the board, and partnerships. I look forward to being the next mayor of Baltimore. I thank you for this opportunity.
Ms. Dixon, you're up.
Thank you, and I want to thank the listening audience for tuning into this debate, because it is an important debate, and it's going to take a leader who can not only lead this city in the right direction, but to revive, reclaim, and rebuild Baltimore. And that's what I want to do. I love the people in this city. I love what we do in this city to make it better by working together collectively. But the first job of the mayor is to make sure the city is safe, to make sure that our babies have an opportunity that I and my children have had in this city, to be able to grow and go to great schools where you could go to a school in West Baltimore, it's the same as East Baltimore, that all schools are the same, and that we can provide opportunities, that our children this summer will have a job and be able to extend those jobs in the school year, that I will have an inclusive administration. I'm going to build on the talent of the people in this city to be a part of my administration, and I know what it takes.
I got to cut you now, Ms. Dixon. I'm sorry. Mr. Warnock, go. We're right up against it. Go ahead, sir.
33 years ago, I came to Baltimore in a pickup truck with a load of student loans, but I had the promise of a job. And this city has given me everything that I have. This election is about what you do when the cameras aren't running. The solution to crime is jobs and opportunity. I know about jobs because I've been creating jobs and businesses for the last 30 years. I know about good schools because I've been creating good schools, Green Street Academy. I know about workforce development and the problems our returning citizens are having because I've been the chairman of the Center for Urban Families for 13 years. I want to write the greatest turnaround story in America with you, the citizens of the town we love.
Mr. Warnock, we got to move. I'm sorry. Mr. Mosby.
The question to Baltimoreans is, has our city improved over the past 20 and 30 years? And I keep hearing the resounding no. Well, if we keep doing the same things over and over again with the same cast of characters, we're going to get the same exact results. This is the first time since 1999 that the citizens of Baltimore had the collective power to come together and elect their next mayor. Polls are not people. We saw that through our last gubernatorial election, where the frontrunner was up by almost 20 points and lost by 5 points. In this election, the citizens of Baltimore had the opportunity to elect an unconventional mayor during these unconventional times. Please check my website out, mosbyformayor.com.
Mr. Mosby, thank you. Election 26, it's in your hands.